life or death situations, verbal abuse. And these things tear a person down. So first and foremost, when having to sort this issue out, we have to deal with that issue. Either how to get it to stop, or at the very least, how to enable a spouse to protect himself. So that's number one. The other problem when it comes to domestic violence is not so clear-cut what to do necessarily. Because violence, not to sound cliched here, but there's a lot of types of violence. But each one does have to be taken seriously. In one sense, the research shows that in terms of, I don't want to say minor violence, but what doesn't end you up in the hospital, let's say, men and women do at equal rates. Could even be that women are more violent than men. But there's a huge difference between the violence of a wife hitting her husband as opposed to a husband hitting her wife, because guys generally are a lot more strong. They do a lot more damage. It's rare for a guy to land into the ER because his wife's hitting him, but it's something that is quite common for women to end up in the ER for that reason. So it's not one-sided usually. Sometimes it is. And this is a problem mostly women have to face, is they end up getting in with the wrong guy. When things started out, he was charming, he was loving, lavishing you with gifts. And then you moved in, then you got married. A lot of people look at these women and say, well, come on, you should just leave. Or, well, this is her decision. If she doesn't want to leave, she deserves it. And there is nothing farther from the truth. It is a serious consideration, leaving those sorts of relationships. And my clinical experience and what seems to be the general consensus in the data is women generally have a better sense of what the outcome is going to be if they leave their husband as opposed to staying with him, or knowing when the right time to leave for their safety and for their kids' safety is. Not always the case, but that's usually the case. And so as a clinician, you have to have a lot of trust in your client, that they know what's going on, and man, do they ever. It's hard to ignore the bullet being put on the table. Just so you know, if you ever leave, that happens. Now, that's not everybody's experience. And sometimes, it is a simple matter of leaving. The guy is a hothead, he'll move on. The question is, how do you disentangle from this guy as quickly and as effectively as possible? Getting you into a woman's shelter. The trick is knowing and being able to really discern when is that the case, where you just cut loose, get the divorce, move on, or having to be very cautious, because this one can turn sideways and upside down quicker than you realize. And so, in treating these sorts of issues, it is relevant to have that consideration, to have, you should always trust your client. That I'm a firm believer in. The clients know themselves. You're not going to be making any big reveals necessarily with people who are coming in. Listen, they're adults, they're wise. It might be that wisdom has to be listened to more. Or maybe there are certain skills that have to be developed, but people have a fair sense of themselves. So, but that is definitely something that has to take center stage in this sort of work. Another part of this is, setting aside real serious violence like that, when it comes to domestic violence, these things can be worked on. Just because a husband or wife are screaming and hitting each other, again, in this first type I was talking about, the not ER situation. Those things can be sorted out. You know, it's tempers can run high, emotions can be deep, especially when it comes to intimate relationships, and skills can be developed. Certain ways of approaching each other, learning how to have a good fight as opposed to a violent fight. Those are real possibilities. Being able to have both spouses come in, doing individual work. You know, this can be a sticky situation, but you know, the main message in this sort of treating these sorts of issues that I think is the most important thing is that there's hope. Whether it's resolving, getting rid of violence and de-escalating that aspect in your relationship, or figuring out how to develop an exit strategy, being wise about it, being safe about it when the violence is serious. There are answers, and you don't have to be stuck.